All right, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining our training today. I'm Tegan Brill, an AmeriCorps member serving with Cherry Health AmeriCorps in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Hey everybody, I'm David Nelson. I work with My Neighborhood Connections in the Detroit area of AmeriCorps.
Hello, my name is Daniela Ifew. I am the Food Education Service member with Food Corps, and I work in the Northern Michigan area.
Hi everyone, I'm Madison Gladney and I work with AmeriCorps Climate Ready at Wayne State in Detroit.
Good morning, I'm Lillian Cunningham. I work with AmeriCorps Urban Safety Program that's out of Wayne State University in Detroit.
Perfect.
Good morning, everyone. My name is, my name wasn't on there. I'm sorry, you guys. My name is Messiah Albert, and my host site is on the north side of Flint, and I am at the URC serving the community for its media's purpose.
Perfect. So we'll start off by what is justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Justice refers to building power of individuals and communities affected by inequities. Equity refers to fair treatment of all people, so the norms, practices, and policies in place ensure identity is not predictive of opportunities or outcomes. Diversity is who is represented in a space or community, and then inclusion refers to the degree to which organizations or communities embrace all persons and enable them to make meaningful contributions. So today we're just going to go over climate and the disproportionate impact it has on the environment and its people. We'll talk about food and people's right to healthy, cultural appropriate, sustainable produced food. We'll talk about schools and how over the past 3 decades, public schools across the country have been on a rapid decline. We'll talk about healthy seniors and showing the partnership to promote health in seniors. And we'll talk about some resources and then play a game of Jeopardy. Any questions to start off with? Perfect.
So we're going to start out with what is climate justice and how does Justice JEDI play into the environment and the work we do at Climate Ready. So first of all, definition of climate justice. Climate justice recognizes the disproportionate impacts of climate change on low-income communities and communities of color around the world. The people and places least responsible for the problem. So to mitigate the effects of climate change, we must first understand that there are bigger players at play. Governmental, corporate, and commercial entities are really the main aggressors of climate change and how it's accelerated over the last 50 years since the 70s. So there's 2 sort of main parts of climate justice: equitable treatment, which we hear the term equity here, and meaningful involvement, terms we both heard before. No group bears the negative consequences of governmental, commercial, and industrial activities. All groups are able to benefit from the laws and policies, not just the major players. The meaningful involvement means that these groups that are smaller and maybe have less power have the same say at the decision-making table. So they're able to meet with the bigger players and meet with the state agencies and have a say in what happens in their communities and in their environments. Next slide. So environmental justice, also similar to climate justice. We have some more terms here. So equity in terms of environmental justice, what does equity mean? It means ensuring that everyone has the equal access to a clean, healthy environment, regardless of their background or socioeconomic status. So everyone has access to clean air, clean water, and land that doesn't have chemicals or toxins in it, as well as protection from environmental harm. So if there is harm, if there are environmental disasters, that they're protected in that case. Inclusion means recognizing all communities in environmental decision-making process. Talk about that. And participation, so meaningful involvement. Accountability is one that we probably need to do more of, which is holding governments, businesses, and other entities accountable for the environmental harm that they cause these communities. We don't really do enough of that in terms of financial accountability, but we do what we can. Then environmental racism is another definition I want to talk about, which is like environmental justice when groups are being targeted because of their race, and their race has something to do with why their environment might be hazardous or harmful. So Detroit is a place, there are several parts of the city where Amos and Climate Ready work, where there's a high population of Black people. Detroit is a mainly Black city, and we have environmental issues that we face. So those things are not a coincidence. Next slide. Climate justice in Michigan, we have two main examples here I want to talk about. So the first one is water contamination in Flint, another highly populated Black city, has been contaminated with their water has been contaminated with lead for about 10 years now, when the city switched from the Detroit water supply to the Flint water supply. This is a very brief summary of the problem, but basically the water pipes were improperly treated, which caused lead to leach into the water. This is a public health and environmental justice crisis, because lead does cause serious problems later on. And again, they would not have done this in Bloomfield Hills or in Clarkston or Grosse Pointe, Michigan. They have not. So that's something to take into consideration. And air quality is one that affects Detroit more so, and the Climate Ready program. Some regions of Detroit are heavily industrial and commercial. And because of that, the emissions are high due to vehicular traffic and other things like that as well. So this causes like asthma and COPD to be exacerbated, and other sorts of respiratory infections. Next slide. So this is how Climate Ready kind of comes into play. AmeriCorps Climate Ready is the program that I work at Wayne State, where we engage in outdoor recreation in the environment while supporting the residents of Detroit in becoming more climate resilient. So we mainly target Detroit, and specifically the east side of Detroit, Jefferson Chalmers neighborhood, which is identified as a hotspot for flooding and poor air quality. The program was created in response to the flooding that took place in 2021, which basically took out many residents' entire basements. And in response to that, we provide flood prevention solutions such as rain gardens, rain barrels, air purifiers and dehumidifiers, dirt packing, caulking, and more. So like with our work, we try and rebalance the equities and give people that don't have the resources to get a sump pump to prevent backflow into their basement, or pay to get concrete siding on their house to prevent flooding. We try and do what we can to get people better air quality, and yeah, basically solve that injustice. I believe that is the last slide. Also, I do want to wait. Can I go back? Sorry. So in terms of the flooding, you can see here at the bottom where the Detroit River has these canals that kind of go in to the neighborhoods, and that's like where the flooding really took place. So like just imagine you walk outside one day and your whole backyard is completely flooded with water, like these are not issues that can be solved with a couple of $100s. So yeah, just wanted to make note of that.
All right, so I will be discussing food justice in various terms and case studies surrounding that. As I am a food education service member, I work in schools and communities closely with the younger generations and just giving them autonomy over eating fresh fruits and vegetables, and just kind of educating them about various cultural and historical connections between food. So we're going to begin by defining a couple of different terms. So the first one is food security, and within food security, there are three pillars, or I guess lenses, because it kind of zooms in more and more based on the pillar. So food security exists when all people at all times have physical and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food that meets their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy lifestyle. So food security not only guarantees the actual physical, the physical need for food, but it also satiates any dietary needs. So maybe you have diabetes, or you have celiac disease and you need those gluten-free or low sugar options. You have them, and you also have availability to organic and sustainably sourced produce. So it's not only the physical availability of food, but it's also the security in that it will aid in your health. So within food security, there are three pillars, and you can refer to the graph or the diagram on the side to kind of understand it, digest it better. So availability is a regional or local scope. So that might be within your town, your area. And this is food production and imports. So how are you existing within a food desert? Are there a ample amount of stores and markets that are sufficient enough to provide you the food that you need? And then if we zoom in a bit, we have access. So this is on a household scope. So potentially household food reserves. Do you know how to can? Do you know how to pickle? Production, maybe you have your own garden yourself. Household income. So are you actually able to purchase these ever-growing prices of organic foods or whole, naturally sourced foods? And then if we zoom in a bit more, it's on the individual scope. So it's your status of health, your cooking abilities, age-related needs, etc. So like I said, it also guarantees the security of fueling your body with the correct nutrients it needs. All right, you can go to the next slide. So now we will define food justice. So food justice is a movement that envisions a food system that is inclusive, community-led, and participatory. So without the exploitation of people, land, or the environment. So sustainable harvesting and farming techniques. It's also culturally relevant and responsive, depending on the location you're in. So it is ecologically sustainable for food production, like I just said. So that is the availability portion of it. And then equitable access to food producing resources. So that deals with access. And then we also have democratic and local powers regarding food policy, because it is, you would be surprised the amount of push and pull that policies have on actual agricultural production. And the last definition is food sovereignty. So it's people's right to healthy, culturally appropriate, sustainably produced food, and the right to define own food and agricultural systems. So for instance, there is a heavy indigenous food sovereignty movement currently happening, because we did, through colonization, strip indigenous communities of their culturally relevant and appropriate production of food through farming, through making salmon fishing illegal for various indigenous communities, making buffalo herding illegal for various indigenous communities, and all of that. So kind of replenishing those resources so that they actually have sovereignty to culturally relevant food. So we can go to the next one. So here are some examples of food justice today. So the first one is PFAs in freshwater fish. So PFAs are key ingredients in jet fuel foam. It's also industrial discharge from many household products and chemicals. It's also included in certain types of food packaging. And for decades, it's been leaching into our drinking water supplies. Madison touched on water quality a little bit earlier, but these heavy metals and PFAs are leaching into our water and in turn our freshwater fish. And eating just one serving of freshwater fish each year could have the same effect of drinking water heavily polluted with forever chemicals for an entire month. And it contains about 2,400 times greater than what is recommended by the EPA per serving of freshwater fish. And this is very detrimental to indigenous communities because much of their protein source comes from freshwater fishing. And also just generally the public, we deem fish as a really, really healthy, nutritionally dense protein, but we're also actively poisoning it at the same time. So that is the first example. And the second example are these two graphs. So if you look to the graph on the left that is green, this is the these are the areas where people cannot afford food. So if you see the darker, as it gets darker green, the percentage of people who actually can afford food gets higher. And then if you look at the graph on the right, that is the estimated diagnosed diabetes among adults 20 years or older in the United States. And the darker it gets, the higher percentage of adult diabetes. And if you put those graphs on top of each other, the densely populated areas that do not have access to nutritional food are also the same areas where people are suffering extremely high rates of like early diagnosed diabetes. And that's not a coincidence. It's because these areas do not have locally produced whole foods, and they're reliant on gas stations, they're reliant on Dollar Generals, they're reliant on all of these really, really heavily processed, governmentally subsidized foods. And so just being aware of the fact that nutrition is medicine, and we have a lot of our health and physical autonomy through food and utilization of food. So just being aware of these disparities, and potentially this could be your call for action. I know that what I do with LeaderCorps is we do go into these lower income communities and we do offer free and reduced lunches to them. And we attempt to create whole nutritious scratch cooked meals as opposed to maybe like Bosco sticks or like frozen foods that we can just throw in the oven to try and prevent more of these patterns reoccurring.
Morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining. As I said, my name is Masai, and I will be touching on the school systems in our country. And so, over the past 3 decades, public schools across the country have been on a rapid decline, with multiple factors being the reasons, such as population shifts, alternative education systems, declining enrollment, and the biggest factor of all being budget cuts. Many schools have been shutting down within older cities such as Detroit, Philadelphia, Chicago, and New York City, et cetera. And these cities tend to have a heavy population of African American and Hispanic people and children, which we consider the inner city youth. In today's age, many public school systems are competing against funded private schools, parochial schools, and nearby districts for fundings and students. This results in people leaving schools behind to be shut down, and just adding on to the stigma that inner city kids don't care about their education. And so today we'll be touching on a lot of things, from the pandemic to budget cuts to stigma. And so if we're being honest with ourselves, there are many factors that come into play when it comes to the school system. And it's not always where the money goes, but how people react to certain situations. For example, the pandemic, COVID-19. Late 2023, Stanford composed a study showing 1.2 million students have been removed from public schools since the pandemic. 15% switched to private schools. Many parents lost their trust in public school systems, feeling as private schools can provide more specialized attention towards things like religious teachings and mental health. 26% switched to homeschooling. But this it brings up many concerns, because it brings up many It brings up many concerns from people, because in states like New Jersey and Illinois, many students don't have to have parent notification to just drop out and say, I'm doing homeschool, which is a big decision for a 15-year-old, 16-year-old when it comes to managing your life and actually getting up and doing it yourself compared to going to school and having a more broad schedule where they have it put for you. And with a final portion suggesting around 230,000 students have been unaccounted for with reasons such as skipping school, dropping out without telling anyone, and unregistered homeschooling, which will go into stigma and just them feeling relevant. A lot of people have just given up. You know, if the school system doesn't care about me and my city doesn't care about me, why should I go to school? And another reason is budget cuts, which is just the act of reducing budget expenditures, which leads to displacement, and which means the moving of something from its place or position. And again, displacement happens within inner city youth, which inner city youth is the area near the center of the city, especially when associated with social and economic problems. And again, inner city youth can be a mixture of African Americans and Hispanics and also Asians even, and just immigrants as well, people coming over and just looking for a new opportunity, but with so many stigmas and things over them, it's hard to get into that and just start a new slate, as they say. Displacement is a reality for both students and faculties. When displacement occurs, more teachers have to uproot their lives and leave the district. But this isn't always as easy for inner city youth, where they have to stay in this district and deal with 30 kids in one classroom with just one teacher. It's hard to teach and learn without the resources. You have textbooks from 2002 that haven't been updated. And again, with 30 kids in one classroom with a deteriorating school that you're walking through every time you switch classes. And if people feel like they've been forgotten, they just stop showing up. And so the Learning Policy Institute states that there is a positive correlation between school funding and student outcomes. Students from well-funded schools can average up to 7% more in pay as adults, also experiencing higher graduation rates. For example, many regions throughout Detroit are experiencing budget cuts. The Ann Arbor School District announced mass layoffs to school staff in order to cut $25 million from the 2024-2025 budget, which is just insane. I saw a stat that said even when you take 10% out of a school system, that's like putting the bottom 10% of school teachers into a school, which is insane. So if you take 10% out and that's giving kids the bottom 10% of teachers, what is 25 million going to look like? And that leads to stigma, which in my opinion, which stigma just means a mark of disgrace associated with a particular circumstance, quality, or person. Stigma, in my opinion, is one of the biggest ones because this type of biased thinking leads to people being forgotten. And it also conforms and shapes people over time, which is also known as social economics. The social economics means the social science that studies how economic activity affects and is shaped by social processes, which in easier terms means I have bigger things to deal with than doing homework. And it's funny because all this kind of connects from the food to the water system. How am I supposed to learn in class and I haven't eaten in 3 days? Or my water is contaminated with lead. I have bigger things to worry about. And so if people aren't given the opportunities and resources, they eventually fall back into what they know, which for many could be substance abuse, organized crime, or just working a trade. And they don't feel relevant anymore, which is the appropriateness of students' learning opportunity. If people don't feel relevant, again, they stop showing up, they stop caring, which can lead to higher crime rates, more schools being left behind. And we see that across our country now. And it's not to say it's happening everywhere. You know, the schools your kids go to it's great. They're dandy, you know, that's why they're there. But again, there are people that are being forgotten about and that need those opportunities. And it starts with just education. It starts with just getting them new textbooks. It starts with talking to them. It starts with, hey, what does your community need compared to this community? Because not every community needs the same thing. And so when you have things like this occurring, it's just hard for people to show up. And it's up to us I know it's a lot easier said than done, but stay in our district because the more voices that are there, they have to pay attention. If we continue to just flood out and leave, for the people who can't leave, they have to deal with the trickling effects of, well, dang, I'm left behind. And so it's just about having people feel relevant and don't letting this biased type of thinking, as I said, shape and conform them. And again, voting, getting out and vote, not just on a nationwide level, but on a local level. You know, in certain states, you can have a say in what goes on in your library. So just be on the lookout and yeah, just know the more you know. Thanks.
Good morning. Okay, I'm going to talk to you about the Healthy Senior Program that we have in AmeriCorps. So what happens is 3 steps that we go through. One is assessment, the next is education, and also intervention. So before you can qualify to be in the program, I want you to remember this. At the end of this, we're having Jeopardy. So I'm going to say some things, so try to remember because they might be in the questions. To participate in this program, you have to, number 1, be 60 years old or older, and you have to be a resident of the city of Detroit. So with the 3 steps, we do a very intense survey. One of them is, well, first we do a pre-screen to make sure that you qualify with the requirements. And then we do a really intense questioning about your health. We ask questions like, do you have asthma? Do you have chronic medical issues? Because all of that's going to make a difference in the things and the products that we can offer you. Because once you enter this program, upon successful completion of it, then we can offer you some free items that are given through our sponsors for the citizens, our healthy seniors, to help improve their lifestyle. So we're going to ask them, they have different areas. We ask, do you have slip and fall? Now, when you ask the seniors, and I'm a senior, but when you ask them what is one of their biggest concerns, most of you might think that it is crime. One of their biggest concerns is slip and fall. They're afraid of falling in their home and being injured. We go through an area where we ask about household safety. Do you have smoke alarms? Do you have burglar alarms? Fire extinguishers? Have you have radon detectors? So all of this is going to make your life better. We go back to the asthma part because we want to know, do they have a shortness of breath? They have problems with the coughing or wheezing? Do they smoke cigarettes? Does anybody smoke cigarettes that come to your house? We want to know about your strenuous activities. Do you have moderate exercises like walking and household work? Do you have social activities where you're talking, dealing with pets? Do you have work-related activities? We ask about the mattresses. We want to know about your mattress. Do you have mattress covers? Do you have wall-to-wall carpeting? Do you have stuffed toys? Because all of this could have dust and different particles that can affect your health. We want to know, do you have volatile organic compounds that you don't even think about that most of you have in your house? Candles, air fresheners. We want to know, do they use bleaching products? Because all of that can have effect on your health. We want to know the traffic, the motor traffic in your area. Why? Because you got a lot of different fumes. If you got a lot of cars going up and down your street, you're dealing with different fumes and things. And it could also be adding to your poor health in regards to air quality. We want to know, do you have storage? Do you store your paint cans in the house? Do you have aerosol sprays in the house? We also, these are all different areas. We ask about dust. Do you have cloth carpet? Do you have, cloth draperies, cloth sofas? How often do you vacuum? Do you have pets? A lot of people have pets. How many do you have? Do they live in the house or out of the house? Excuse me. We want to know, do you have pests? Roaches, bed bugs, mice? All of that is going to naturally be a concern and affect your health. We ask questions. Do you have moisture and mold in the house? Water damage, leaks? Do you have a dehumidifier? Do you use a humidifier? Do you have bedrooms in the basement? Have your basement flooded? We want to know about dampness within the last 12 months. Do you have condensation on your windows? Do you have floor coverings in your bedroom? Do you have hardwood floors or wall-to-wall carpet? Have you had flood damage? Because Detroit did have experienced a really bad flood, which is also what Madison was talking about, and it affected a lot of areas, and that means a lot of people still had mold and damage to the to the structure of their home. There's questions in regards to heating, cooling, and ventilation. Do you have forced air? Do you have fireplace that you use? Do you have radiators? Do you have central air? How often do you change your filters? How many know that you should change your filters at least every 6 months? We want to know if the seniors are cooking, what type of stove do they have? Do they have gas or electric stove? Do you have windows that you open when you cook? Do you have an exhaust fan? What year was your home built? Has it been tested for lead? Has anybody in the home been tested for lead? Is there any chipping or peeling in your home? Have you been a victim of crime? Has your car been burglarized, or have you been robbed? Anything? We want to know, because those affect how you look at your neighborhood and how you deal with your health issues. We ask all those questions, and we also offer things, because if you had an issue with your car, we offer free car clubs and wheel locks. After we ask all of those questions, we do that assessment. We set up a home interview so that we can come out, and then at that time, they come out and they check. The people that come have a flow machine to check the air quality. They measure the rooms and they look to see the things that you might need, and according to the things that you said. At that time, they also might bring out you an air purifier, a humidifier, safety posts that you can use in your bathrooms, vacuum cleaners, burglar alarms, cameras, the things that they offer also for slip and fall, the mats in the bathtubs. They're offering things because of what you said you needed, because we want to improve the quality of life. So you see the two persons on the screen. This is one person whose home that we were able to go and help her out. So I just want you to hear what she has to say, her and her daughter.
Lillian, if you can pause for a second. We're going to get kicked out of this. Our other meeting was being used, so this is the alternative meeting. So I have put the new Zoom meeting in the chat. If we can switch over to that, everybody can join there, and then you can start the video once we get in there. I was hoping you'd be able to finish before we had to get kicked out, but it's not going to happen. So if we can pause and shift, I will go start the other meeting.
Okay.